Welcome, everyone, to Easy History Podcast. Today, we're going to deep dive into the Great Depression.
Sounds good.
A period
What's the period?
Yeah, a period that still has a lot to teach us about economics, society, and politics. We want to understand not just how the crash happened, but how it reverberated across the globe.
Around the world.
Especially in the U.S.,
Yeah.
which held such international sway.
Yeah, it's easy to just focus on
Right.
You know,
the crash itself.
The crash itself.
Yeah.
But you can't really grasp the impact without understanding
the
world before the Depression.
Okay, so we're going back.
The
Roaring 20s.
That's right.
That era of flapper dresses, jazz music, and seemingly unstoppable economic growth.
Unstoppable.
Wasn't that when Henry Ford's assembly lines really took off?
Yeah.
Making cars affordable for the everyday American.
Exactly. It was a time of incredible technological advancement and a boom in consumerism. Credit became easily available, and people were eager to
buy the latest
gadgets and products.
Yeah.
But this apparent prosperity masked some serious underlying issues.
Like what? It seems like everyone was doing well in the Roaring 20s.
Well, that's the problem with focusing only on the surface.
Okay.
Income inequality was already a major issue with a huge gap between the wealthy elite and the working class. Racial discrimination was still deeply entrenched. And we even saw a resurgence
of the Ku Klux Klan?
Of the Ku Klux Klan during this period. Many groups were entirely excluded from the economic boom.
Yeah.
And the prosperity was concentrated in the hands of a few.
So even during those good times.
The good times.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah.
There were seeds of crisis being sown.
Absolutely. One of the biggest issues was overproduction.
Overproduction. Okay.
Businesses were churning out goods faster than people could consume them.
Oh, wow.
Leading to...
like a glut.
A glut in the market.
Okay.
Couple this with the increasingly risky behavior.
Risky behavior in the stock market.
In the stock market.
Okay. What do you mean by risky behavior?
Well, during the 1920s, the stock market became a
playground
for speculation. People weren't just investing in companies based on their actual value.
Okay.
They were betting on future growth.
Got it.
Buying stocks with borrowed money.
Wow.
And hoping to
get rich quick.
Yeah. This created an artificial bubble where stock prices were massively
inflated.
So it was like a house of cards.
Just waiting to collapse.
Precisely.
Oh my gosh.
And when reality set in, the collapse was swift and devastating. A series of events, including a
drop in consumer spending.
Yeah. And a realization that companies
weren't as profitable as they seemed.
Right.
Triggered a
panic
in the markets.
And that led to Black Thursday.
Yes.
The infamous stock market crash.
That's right.
October 24, 1929.
Yes. On that day, billions of dollars vanished into thin air.
Oh, my goodness.
As stock prices plummeted. Wow. The effects were immediate and catastrophic. Yeah. Not just in the U.S., but around the world.
Because economies were already so interconnected.
The U.S. was a major player in global trade.
Okay.
And its sudden economic collapse sent shockwaves across the world.
Oh, my goodness.
Countries dependent on exporting goods to the U.S.
The U.S. saw their economies crumble.
Wow.
As demand plummeted.
Wow.
Latin America, which relied heavily on exporting agricultural products, was hit.
Especially hard. Yeah.
And in Europe, which was still struggling.
To recover from World War I.
The crisis deepened existing tensions and vulnerabilities.
So what did the U.S. do to address the crisis?
Well,
both domestically.
Under President Hoover, the initial response was rooted in the prevailing economic thought of the time, austerity.
Austerity.
This meant cutting government spending, and raising taxes to balance the budget. The idea was to restore confidence
in the economy.
By demonstrating fiscal responsibility. The U.S. also adopted protectionist measures, raising tariffs on imported goods
to protect
domestic industries.
Gotcha.
They hoped to keep jobs and money within their own borders.
But wouldn't that hurt other countries? Making their situation even worse? And wouldn't cutting government spending at a time?
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, we can see that many of these policies actually exacerbated the crisis.
Oh, wow.
While austerity might seem logical in theory, it can backfire when an economy is in a deep recession.
Right.
Cutting spending further reduces
demand,
leading to more unemployment and a vicious cycle
of economic
decline.
So if austerity wasn't the answer, what was?
That's where John Maynard Keynes comes in.
John Maynard Keynes. Okay.
He was a brilliant economist who offered a radically different approach. Keynes argued that
during times of crisis, governments should actually increase spending.
Spend more when you're already...
Even if it means going into debt.
In trouble.
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive.
It does.
Yeah.
But Keynes argued that this spending would stimulate demand and create jobs.
Great jobs. Okay.
Kickstarting the economy.
So the government...
He even suggested that governments could
just pay people to do seemingly useless tasks.
Like digging holes.
Digging holes and filling them back in.
Just
to get money flowing back into people's pockets.
But
the task itself.
Exactly. It sounds crazy.
Yeah, it does sound crazy.
But Keynesian economics challenged the conventional wisdom of austerity and offered a new way of thinking about
government intervention.
Yeah. During times of
economic
crisis.
Did anyone actually try Keynes's ideas?
Oh.
Sounds pretty revolutionary. As it turns out, the U.S. was about to get a leader who was willing to embrace
these new ideas.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
FDR. And that brings us to...
the New Deal.
FDR,
the man who promised America a New Deal. What exactly did this New Deal?
The New Deal was a series of programs and reforms implemented by Roosevelt's administration. Directly inspired by Keynesian principles. It was
ambitious.
Truly ambitious undertaking, aiming to address a wide range of issues, from unemployment and poverty to agricultural decline, banking failures.
So the New Deal was like a massive experiment.
It was unlike anything that had been tried before.
Economic ideas into action?
In American history.
Wow.
It touched nearly every
aspect
of American life.
I know the New Deal involved a ton of different programs.
A ton.
So where do we even begin?
Where do we even begin?
Well, one of the most significant was the
Agricultural Adjustment Act.
Or AAA. This program aimed to address the crisis in the agricultural sector by setting production quotas and paying farmers subsidies.
So the government was actually stepping in to control how much farmers could produce.
It was a radical departure from the traditional laissez-faire approach. The idea was to stabilize prices by preventing overproduction.
Because farmers were struggling with...
Remember, farmers were struggling with plummeting crop prices?
Crop prices.
Surplus.
Due to surplus. The AAA tried to address this by essentially creating a planned economy for agriculture, at least to a certain extent.
That sounds like a pretty controversial move. Were there other programs aimed at
different sectors?
Another key component
of the economy
of the New Deal was the
National Industrial Recovery Act.
National Industrial Recovery Act, or NIRA. This act was designed to promote fair competition and protect workers' rights.
So it's trying to find a balance between supporting businesses and workers.
But the NIRA encouraged businesses to cooperate in setting prices and production levels. This was a way to prevent cutthroat competition that could drive down wages and lead to layoffs. The act also guaranteed workers the right to
collective bargaining.
allowing them to negotiate
better wages and working conditions.
Better wages and working conditions
Through
unions.
Unions, right. It even established a
minimum wage.
Minimum wage for the first time.
For the first time.
Wow. That's a pretty big deal. Were there any programs?
Oh, absolutely.
Specifically aimed at?
One of the most iconic and enduring legacies of the New Deal is the
Works Progress Administration.
Works Progress Administration.
Yeah.
Better known as the WPA.
WPA, okay.
This program was a massive public works initiative.
So we're not talking about digging and filling holes here.
Not at all.
Right, good. Employing millions of Americans to build infrastructure projects across the country.
What kind of projects?
The WPA built.
They undertake.
Roads, bridges, dams, airports, schools, hospitals.
Wow.
You name it.
Really?
Think of some of the most
iconic landmarks in the U.S.
Yeah. And there's a good chance
that the WPA had a hand in.
The WPA had a hand in building them.
And
it wasn't just about construction. The WPA also employed artists, writers, musicians, and theater professionals.
Wow.
Creating a vibrant cultural scene.
During a time of immense hardship.
So it was a way to not just address unemployment.
Exactly.
But also invest in the
The WPA had a dual benefit.
Future of the country.
It provided much-needed jobs and income for millions of struggling Americans.
Right.
And it created valuable assets that would benefit the economy.
For generations
to come.
And it probably also boosted morale.
Absolutely.
Giving people a sense of...
The WPA projects instilled a sense of pride and community.
Purpose and accomplishment.
People could see tangible evidence that things were getting better, that progress was being made.
Yeah. Pretty dark time.
Yeah.
What about programs for people who...
That's where the Social Security Act of 1935 comes in.
Couldn't work, like the elderly or disabled.
This landmark legislation established a system of social insurance, providing a safety net for the most vulnerable members of society.
So this is where the idea of Social Security as we know it today comes from.
The Social Security Act created a system of old age pensions, unemployment insurance, and aid for dependent children. And people with disabilities.
Gotcha.
It was a revolutionary step toward establishing a modern welfare state in America.
So the New Deal wasn't just about
Exactly.
Fixing the immediate crisis of the Depression.
It fundamentally changed the relationship between the government and the people, establishing the idea that the government has a responsibility to protect its citizens from economic hardship and to promote
social welfare.
Social welfare.
But surely not everyone was happy with these
Absolutely.
radical changes.
Yeah.
There must have been some pushback against.
The New Deal was incredibly controversial.
A New Deal.
Conservatives and business leaders argued that it was too much government intervention.
Okay.
That it stifled free enterprise and created a bloated bureaucracy.
So it ignited a debate.
Precisely.
About the role of government in the economy.
The New Deal challenged traditional notions.
A debate that continues to this day.
Of limited government.
Yeah.
It pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable.
For the government to do.
For the government to do.
Right.
And it sparked intense debates about individual liberty versus collective responsibility.
It's amazing how much these programs...
It's a testament.
Which seem almost common sense today.
To how profoundly the Depression shook the foundation.
It was so radical and controversial.
Economic thought.
Back then.
It forced people to question.
Yeah.
Long-held assumptions about capitalism, the role of government.
Right.
And the nature of society itself.
So what was the ultimate impact of the New Deal? Did it actually...
Complex question.
End the Depression?
The New Deal certainly helped alleviate some of the worst suffering of the Depression.
Okay.
It provided jobs relief and a sense of hope for millions of Americans.
But it's hard to say definitively whether it...
ended the Depression.
Ended the Depression?
Yeah.
Because World War II happened.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that created a huge surge in economic activity.
The massive government spending and industrial mobilization required for the war effort effectively ended unemployment and boosted industrial production.
So some might argue that the war, not the New Deal, was
that's a common argument.
a real turning point.
But it's important to remember that the New Deal
laid the groundwork.
Laid the groundwork for this recovery.
Yeah.
It created a basic safety net, stimulated demand, and invested in infrastructure, all of which helped position the U.S. economy for the wartime boom.
So the New Deal's legacy is a bit
absolutely
nuanced.
It fundamentally reshaped the social contract between the government and the people, creating a more active and interventionist role for government in addressing
economic and social
problems.
Yeah.
And that legacy continues to shape
political
debates and policy decisions to this day.
So we've been focusing a lot on the U.S. experience.
Yes, experience.
But we can't forget that,
of course,
the Great Depression was a global crisis.
Yeah.
What were the repercussions?
The effects were truly far-reaching.
Yeah, in other parts of the world.
The Depression really exposed the weaknesses of the international economic order. Remember, at this point, the U.S. had largely retreated.
Yeah, retreated into
isolationism
following World War I.
World War I.
Right. They were reluctant to take on a global...
And this created a vacuum on the world stage.
Leadership role.
And as we know, nature abhors a vacuum.
Wow.
The Depression created a breeding ground for extremist ideologies.
Extremists?
Yes.
Especially in Europe.
In Europe.
You mean like the rise of fascism and...
Precisely. The economic turmoil, coupled with the feeling that...
Democratic
governments had failed to protect their people, led to widespread disillusionment and anger.
Yeah.
This made people more susceptible to
radical solutions
and promises of national revival.
It's chilling how economic hardship can create conditions ripe for...
In Germany, for example, Hitler and the Nazi Party were able to exploit the economic crisis and the deep resentment towards the
Treaty of Versailles
to gain power.
Wow.
They promised to restore German greatness and blamed minorities
for the
country's problems.
Yeah. It's a stark reminder.
Indeed.
How fragile democracies.
And the world paid a heavy price for this.
Can be in the face of...
In the years that followed as...
economic instability.
Hitler's aggression. Ultimately led to World War II.
It's incredible how the Great Depression had such...
It truly was.
A profound impact.
A turning point.
Not just on economics, but on the course of...
It exposed the vulnerabilities of the global economic system, fueled the rise of dangerous ideologies, and set the stage for another devastating global conflict.
Wow.
But it also led to some profound
shifts
in thinking about the role of...
In terms of economic intervention.
Exactly. The New Deal in the U.S. Was a radical departure from the laissez-faire policy that had dominated before.
Before the Depression.
It showed that governments could play a more active role in mitigating
economic crises and protecting their...
citizens. And this had implications far beyond American borders.
So the New Deal wasn't just... a domestic program.
It provided a model for other countries grappling with the Depression.
Wow.
The idea that governments had a responsibility to intervene in the economy, to provide social safety nets, and to stimulate demand, gain traction worldwide. It's not an exaggeration to say that the New Deal helped pave the way for the development of the modern welfare state.
Wow. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways we can draw from?
First, we need to remember that economies are...
The Great Depression.
Interconnected. What happens in one part of the world can have ripple effects.
Across the globe.
Yep. Second, we need to understand the dangers of...
unfettered capitalism.
Yeah. The lack of regulation and oversight during
the Roaring 20s.
The Roaring 20s contributed to the severity of the crash. And finally, we have to recognize the vital role of
government in times of crisis.
The New Deal, while imperfect, showed that government action can alleviate suffering stimulate recovery, and create a more just and equitable
society. It's a lot to ponder, for sure.
It is.
The Great Depression wasn't just a...
It's a lesson we must never forget.
Historical event.
Yeah.
It's a reminder.
It is.
Of the fragility of our systems and the need for vigilance.
Absolutely.
And informed action.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this incredible...
It's been my pleasure.
...deep dive. It's been a fascinating and sobering exploration of a truly pivotal period in history.